The muffled screaming came from underground. Keisha stopped dead in her tracks, her heart hammering against her ribs as she listened to the terrible sound drifting up from somewhere beneath the forest floor. The voice was hoarse, desperate, and so raw with terror that it made her skin crawl. She had been walking through these woods for 20 minutes, searching for her 8-year-old son Marcus, who had wandered off while they were having a picnic near the old hiking trail. Now she stood frozen, clutching her phone with shaking hands, trying to convince herself that what she was hearing wasn't real. The screaming came again. Louder this time. More desperate. Help me. Please. Somebody help me. Keisha's breath caught in her throat. The voice was coming from directly beneath her feet. She looked down at the ground, covered in fallen leaves and broken twigs, and saw nothing unusual. Just dirt and rocks and the normal debris of the forest floor. But the voice was there, muffled but clear, like someone was trapped in a box underground. "Hello," she called out, her voice barely above a whisper. "Is someone there?" The screaming stopped immediately. For a moment, the forest was completely silent except for the sound of her own rapid breathing. Then a different voice came up from the ground. Weaker now but filled with desperate hope. "Please," the voice said. "Please help me. I'm buried alive down here." Keisha's knees nearly gave out. She had heard about things like this happening in movies but never in real life. Never in the quiet woods outside her small town where she had grown up, where nothing exciting or terrible ever happened. She looked around frantically, trying to see if this was some kind of sick joke, but the forest was empty except for her. "How long have you been down there?" she called out, kneeling on the ground and pressing her ear close to the earth. "I don't know," came the muffled reply. "Hours maybe. I can't move. There's not much air left." Keisha's mind raced. She needed to call 911, but her phone showed no signal in this part of the woods. She would have to run back to the main trail, but that would take at least 15 minutes, and the man underground might not have that long. She could hear the panic in his voice, the way it shook with each word. "I'm going to get help," she said. "Just hold on." "No, wait." The voice was urgent now, terrified. "Don't leave me. Please. I've been calling for hours and you're the first person to hear me. What if no one else comes?" Keisha felt tears stinging her eyes. She thought about Marcus, still lost somewhere in these woods, and about this stranger buried alive beneath her feet. How could she choose between them? How could she live with herself if she left this man to die? "What's your name?" she asked, buying time while she tried to think of a solution. "David," the voice replied. "David Chin. I'm supposed to be in a meeting right now. My assistant will be worried when I don't show up." "I'm Keisha," she said. "I'm going to figure out how to get you out of there." She stood up and began examining the ground more carefully. Now that she knew what to look for, she could see that the earth in a small area was slightly disturbed, as if it had been dug up recently and then covered over. The leaves on top were arranged too neatly, not scattered the way they would be naturally. "David," she called out. "Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up down there?" His voice came back weaker than before. "I was hiking early this morning. Haven't done it in years, but my doctor said I needed more exercise. I was on one of the side trails when the ground just gave way. Like there was a hole covered with branches and leaves. I fell through and hit my head. When I woke up, I was in some kind of wooden box underground." Keisha's blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. Someone had dug a hole, built a box, covered it with branches and leaves, and waited for someone to fall in. It was a trap. A deliberate, calculated trap. "David, listen to me," she said, trying to keep her voice calm even though her heart was pounding. "I think someone did this to you on purpose. We need to get you out of there right now." She began clawing at the dirt with her bare hands, but it was packed hard and she barely made a dent. She needed tools or help or both. She looked around desperately and spotted a fallen branch that might work as a makeshift shovel. "I'm going to try to dig you out," she said. "But I need you to tell me if you start having trouble breathing, okay?" "Okay," came the faint reply. "Keisha, thank you. I thought I was going to die down here." "You're not going to die," she said firmly, even though she wasn't sure she believed it herself. "I'm not going to let that happen." She began digging frantically with the branch, scraping away dirt and debris. It was slow work and she could feel precious time slipping away. The sun was getting lower in the sky and she still hadn't found Marcus. But she couldn't abandon David. She wouldn't be able to live with herself. "David, are you still there?" she called out after several minutes of digging. "Still here," he replied, but his voice was getting weaker. Getting harder to breathe though. Keisha dug faster, ignoring the blisters forming on her hands and the ache in her back. She had to save him. She had to save them both. The branch snapped in half just as Keisha felt it hit something solid. "I think I found the top of the box," she called out, breathing hard from the effort of digging. She had managed to clear away about 2 feet of dirt and debris, revealing what looked like rough wooden planks underneath. "Thank God," David's voice came back, clearer now but still weak. "I can hear you better now too." Keisha wiped the sweat from her forehead and looked around for something else to dig with. Her hands were raw and bleeding from the rough bark of the broken branch, but she ignored the pain. She found a flat rock that might work and began scraping away more dirt from the edges of the wooden box. "David, can you push up on the lid from your side?" she asked. "Maybe we can get it open." She heard scraping sounds from below and then David's voice, strained with effort. "I'm trying but it's heavy. And I think there might be dirt piled on top of it." Keisha cleared away more dirt until she could see the outline of the box lid more clearly. It was crude but solid, made of what looked like old fence posts nailed together. Whoever had built this had planned it carefully. The thought made her stomach turn. "David, I need to ask you something," she said, continuing to dig. "Do you have any idea who might have done this to you? Anyone who might want to hurt you?" There was a long pause before he answered. I run a company. A big one. Sometimes people get angry about business decisions. But I never thought anyone would go this far." "What kind of company?" "Real estate development. We buy land and build shopping centers, apartment complexes, that kind of thing. There have been some protests lately about a project we're working on, but nothing violent." Keisha nodded even though he couldn't see her. It made sense. Rich developers weren't always popular, especially in small towns where people valued their open spaces. But this was extreme even for someone who was angry about losing their land. "How big is your company?" she asked, partly to keep him talking and alert and partly because she was curious. "Pretty big," David said. "We have offices in 12 states. About 3,000 employees." Keisha paused in her digging. 3,000 employees. That was more people than lived in her entire town. This man wasn't just wealthy, he was seriously rich. The kind of rich that seemed almost imaginary to someone like her, who worked 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over Marcus's head. "That's a lot of people," she said. "Yeah, it is. Sometimes I forget how big it's gotten. Started with just me and my college roommate 20 years ago." "What's it called?" "Your company?" "Chin Development Group. Maybe you've heard of it?" Keisha had heard of it. Everyone in the area had. They were the company that wanted to build a massive shopping complex on the old farmland outside town. The project had been in the news for months, with heated town hall meetings and protest signs on every corner. A lot of people were angry about it, saying it would ruin the character of the town and destroy the local businesses downtown. "I've heard of it," she said carefully. "You're against the project, aren't you?" David asked. "I can hear it in your voice." Keisha sighed and kept digging. "I don't know enough about business to have a strong opinion. I just know a lot of people in town are upset." "They don't understand," David said. "We're bringing jobs. Economic growth. This town needs development or it's going to die. Some people think there are more important things than economic growth." "Like what?" "Like community. Like knowing your neighbors. Like having places where kids can play safely and families can afford to live." David was quiet for a moment. "I never thought about it that way," he said finally. Keisha had cleared away most of the dirt from the lid now, and she could see that it was held down by several large rocks placed strategically around the edges. She began moving them aside one by one. "David, I'm going to try to lift the lid now," she said. "Can you push from your side?" "I'll try." Keisha got her fingers under one edge of the lid and pulled up while David pushed from below. The lid shifted slightly but didn't come free. She tried again, putting all her weight behind it, and felt it move a little more. "It's working," David said, his voice filled with hope. "I can feel it moving." Keisha strained against the lid, her muscles burning with the effort. It lifted another inch, then another. She could see a sliver of darkness underneath now, and she could hear David breathing more easily. "Almost there," she said, gritting her teeth and pulling harder. The lid suddenly gave way, flying open and sending Keisha stumbling backward. She regained her balance and looked down into the hole, where she could see David's face looking up at her in the fading daylight. He was younger than she had expected, maybe in his early 40s, with dark hair and eyes that were wide with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I was going to die down there." "You're not dead yet," Keisha said, reaching down to help him up. "But we need to get you out of there and get some help. Someone did this to you on purpose and they might still be around." David grabbed her hand and she pulled him up out of the hole. He was shaky on his feet and had a nasty cut on his forehead, but he seemed otherwise unharmed. He was wearing expensive hiking clothes that were now dirty and torn, and Keisha could see that he was exactly what she had imagined, a rich businessman who probably had no idea what real struggle looked like. But right now none of that mattered. Right now he was just a human being who had nearly died and she had saved him. "We need to get out of these woods," she said. "And I need to find my son. He's lost somewhere out here." David's eyes widened. "Your son is missing? How old is he?" "His name is Marcus. He wandered off while we were having a picnic." "We'll find him," David said firmly. "I promise you we'll find him." They had been walking for 10 minutes when they heard Marcus calling for help. "Mama. Mama, where are you?" Keisha's heart leaped with relief and terror at the same time. Marcus sounded scared and far away, but he was alive and he was calling for her. She grabbed David's arm and pulled him in the direction of the voice. "Marcus," she called out. "Baby, where are you? Keep talking so I can find you." "I'm over here. I can't get down." They pushed through the underbrush, following the sound of Marcus's voice until they came to a small clearing where an old oak tree stood. Marcus was about 15 feet up in the tree, sitting on a thick branch and looking down at them with tears streaming down his face. "Mama," he cried when he saw her. "I was trying to climb down but I got scared. The branch broke when I tried to get to the next one." Keisha looked up at her son, relief flooding through her. He was scratched up and dirty, but he appeared to be unharmed. The problem was that he was too high up for her to reach, and the lower branches that might have helped him climb down were either broken or too far apart. "It's okay, baby," she called up to him. "We're going to get you down. Just stay right where you are and don't try to move." David was studying the tree looking for a way to climb up. "I think I can get up there," he said. "I used to climb trees all the time when I was a kid." "Are you sure?" Keisha asked. "You just got out of a hole in the ground. Maybe you should rest first." "I'm fine," David said. "Besides, your son is scared. The sooner we get him down, the better." He grabbed the lowest branch and pulled himself up with more agility than Keisha would have expected from a businessman in expensive clothes. He climbed steadily upward, testing each branch before putting his full weight on it. "Hey there, Marcus," he said when he reached the branch below the boy. "I'm David. I'm a friend of your mom's." Marcus looked down at him suspiciously. "I don't know you." "That's true you don't," David said. "But your mom just saved my life, so I owe her a big favor. How about I help you get down from here?" "Are you going to hurt me?" The question caught David off guard. "No, Marcus. I would never hurt you. I just want to help you get back to your mom safely." Marcus looked down at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "It's okay, baby. He's trying to help." "Okay," Marcus said in a small voice. David carefully made his way up to Marcus's branch. "All right, buddy, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to climb down first and then I'm going to help guide your feet to the right places. Your mom is going to be right there at the bottom to catch you if you fall. Does that sound good?" Marcus nodded, wiping his nose on his sleeve. David climbed down to the next branch and held out his hands. "Okay, now turn around and put your feet down toward me. I'll guide you to the right spot." It took several minutes, but David patiently helped Marcus make his way down from branch to branch. When Marcus was finally close enough to the ground, Keisha reached up and lifted him down into her arms. "Thank you," she said to David, holding Marcus tight. "Thank you so much." "Don't mention it," David said, climbing down the rest of the way. "I'm just glad he's safe." Marcus buried his face in his mother's shoulder. "I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to get lost. I saw a rabbit and I followed it and then I couldn't find the way back." "It's okay, baby," Keisha said, stroking his hair. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." David brushed the dirt off his clothes and looked around the clearing. "We should probably get out of these woods," he said. "Whoever built that trap might still be around." Keisha nodded, but she was looking at David with new eyes. The way he had talked to Marcus, the patience he had shown, the way he had climbed up to help without hesitation, it wasn't what she would have expected from a rich businessman. Maybe there was more to him than she had assumed. "The main trail is this way," she said, pointing east. "My car is parked at the trailhead." They started walking, with Marcus holding tightly to his mother's hand. David walked slightly behind them, keeping watch for any signs of danger. The sun was getting lower in the sky, and the woods were starting to feel less friendly and more ominous. "David," Keisha said after they had walked for a few minutes, "why were you really out here hiking? You said your doctor told you to exercise, but this seems like a pretty remote place for someone who doesn't hike often." David was quiet for a moment. "I needed to think," he said finally. About the project. About what people have been saying. I thought maybe if I came out here to the land we want to develop, I might understand better why everyone is so upset. And do you? Understand, I mean? David looked around at the trees, at the way the light filtered through the leaves, at Marcus walking ahead of them and pointing out interesting rocks and bugs to his mother. I'm starting to, he said. They walked in silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Keisha found herself stealing glances at David, trying to figure him out. He wasn't what she had expected at all. He seemed genuinely grateful for her help, and he had been kind to Marcus without any prompting. But he was still the man who wanted to tear down the farmland and build a shopping center. He was still the enemy, wasn't he? Keisha, David said suddenly. Can I ask you something? Sure. Why did you save me? I mean, you could have just called for help and left. Why did you stay and dig me out yourself? Keisha thought about it. I don't know, she said honestly. I couldn't just leave you there to die. It wouldn't have been right. Even though you disagree with what my company is doing? Even though. David nodded slowly. That says a lot about who you are as a person. It doesn't say anything special, Keisha said. It just says I'm human. But as they continued walking toward the trailhead, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had happened in those woods. Something that was going to change both of their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The police station was buzzing with activity when they arrived. Detective Sarah Williams took their statements separately, starting with David. Keisha sat in the waiting area with Marcus, who had fallen asleep in her lap despite all the excitement. She watched through the glass as David talked to the detective, gesturing as he explained what had happened. When it was her turn, Keisha gently woke Marcus and asked the desk officer to keep an eye on him while she talked to Detective Williams. So you just happened to be walking through the woods when you heard someone calling for help? The detective asked. I was looking for my son, Keisha explained. He had wandered off from our picnic spot. That's when I heard the screaming. And you had never seen Mr. Chin before today? Never. I mean, I knew about his company from the news, but I had never met him personally. Detective Williams made some notes. Mr. Chin says someone deliberately trapped him. That this wasn't an accident. That's what it looked like to me too, Keisha said. The hole was covered with branches and leaves like someone was trying to hide it. And the box he was in, that was built specifically to hold a person. Did you see anyone else in the woods? Anyone who might have been watching? Keisha shook her head. No, it was just me and Marcus. Well, and David after I found him. The detective asked a few more questions and then let Keisha go. David was waiting for her in the lobby, looking tired but relieved. They're going to investigate, he said. Crime scene team is heading out to the woods right now. Good, Keisha said. Someone needs to be held accountable for what they did to you. David looked down at Marcus, who was rubbing his eyes sleepily. Is he okay? He's fine. Just tired. It's been a long day for all of us. They walked out to the parking lot together. David's car, a sleek black BMW, was parked next to Keisha's 10-year-old Honda Civic. The contrast between the two vehicles was stark, a reminder of the vast difference in their circumstances. Keisha, David said as she opened her car door. I want to do something to thank you. You saved my life today. You don't need to thank me, she said. Anyone would have done the same thing. No, they wouldn't have, David said seriously. Most people would have called for help and left. You stayed. You dug me out with your bare hands. You risked your own safety to save a complete stranger. Keisha felt uncomfortable with the praise. I just did what felt right. Let me take you and Marcus to dinner, David said. Somewhere nice. It's the least I can do. Keisha looked down at her dirty clothes and then at Marcus, who was covered in dirt and tree sap. We're not exactly dressed for somewhere nice. Then somewhere casual. Please. I insist. Marcus tugged on his mother's sleeve. Mama, I'm hungry. Keisha sighed. She was hungry too and she was too tired to go home and cook. Okay, she said. But nothing fancy. And we're paying for our own food. Absolutely not, David said. You're my guests. They ended up at a family restaurant near the highway, the kind of place with plastic menus and a kids' play area. David looked completely out of place in his expensive hiking clothes, but he didn't seem to care. He helped Marcus color on the paper placemat while they waited for their food, and he listened patiently as the 8-year-old told him about school and his favorite video games. Do you have any kids? Marcus asked. David's expression grew sad. No, I don't. How come? Marcus, Keisha warned. That's not polite to ask. It's okay, David said. I was married once but it didn't work out. We never had children. That's sad, Marcus said matter-of-factly. Kids are fun. David smiled. Yes, they are. Their food arrived and they ate in comfortable silence for a while. Keisha found herself watching David interact with Marcus, noting how naturally he seemed to connect with her son. It was strange to think that just a few hours ago she had never met this man, and now here they were, sharing a meal like old friends. Keisha, David said after Marcus had gone to play in the play area. Can I ask you something personal? I guess. What do you do for work? I'm a nurse at the county hospital. I also work part-time at the diner on Main Street on weekends. 2 jobs. That must be hard. Keisha shrugged. You do what you have to do. Marcus's father doesn't help out much, so it's just me and him. That's a lot of responsibility for one person. Like I said, you do what you have to do. David nodded thoughtfully. I admire that. Taking care of your family, working hard to provide for your son. It's admirable. It's just life, Keisha said. Everyone has their struggles. Not everyone handles them with as much grace as you do. Keisha felt herself blushing. She wasn't used to compliments, especially from successful men in expensive clothes. You don't know me well enough to say that. I know enough, David said. I know you saved my life today without thinking twice about it. I know you're a good mother who was willing to risk her own safety to find her lost son. I know you work 2 jobs to take care of your family. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. Keisha looked over at Marcus, who was climbing through a plastic tunnel in the play area. He's a good kid, she said. He deserves better than what I can give him sometimes. What do you mean? I mean he deserves a father who's around. He deserves a mother who doesn't have to work all the time. He deserves a house with a yard instead of a small apartment. He deserves a lot of things that I can't provide. He deserves a mother who loves him, David said quietly. Everything else is just details. Keisha looked at him, surprised by the emotion in his voice. You sound like you know something about that. My parents worked all the time when I was growing up, David said. They were immigrants and they were determined to make a better life for their family. They worked 16-hour days, 7 days a week. I hardly saw them. But look how you turned out. You're successful. Success isn't everything, David said. Sometimes I wonder if I would have been happier with less success and more time with the people who mattered. Marcus came running back to the table, his face flushed from playing. Mama, can we come back here again? This place is fun. We'll see, baby, Keisha said, ruffling his hair. David smiled at Marcus and then looked at Keisha. I meant what I said earlier. I want to do something to thank you for saving my life. Something more than just dinner. David, you don't owe me anything. Yes, I do, he said firmly. Let me think about it. There has to be something I can do. As they got ready to leave, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something. She didn't know what, exactly, but something told her that David Chen was going to be in her life for a while longer. The newspaper article came out 3 days later. Local woman saves businessman from underground trap, read the headline in the town's weekly paper. The story described how Keisha had found David buried alive in the woods and had dug him out herself, risking her own safety to save a stranger's life. Keisha was mortified. She had specifically asked Detective Williams to keep her name out of the press, but somehow the story had gotten out anyway. By the time she got to work at the hospital that morning, everyone was talking about it. I can't believe you didn't tell us what happened, said Janet, one of the other nurses. You're a hero. I'm not a hero, Keisha said, embarrassed by the attention. I just did what anyone would do. Not anyone, said Dr. Peterson, the head of the emergency department. That took real courage, Keisha. You should be proud. But Keisha wasn't proud. She was worried. The article had mentioned that David was the CEO of Chin Development Group, the company that wanted to build the shopping center. Now everyone in town knew that she had saved the life of the man they considered their enemy. She got her first taste of the backlash when she stopped by the grocery store after work. Mrs. Henderson, who had lived in town her whole life, cornered her in the produce section. I saw the article in the paper, the older woman said, her voice cold. I can't believe you helped that man. He was going to die if I didn't help him, Keisha said quietly. Maybe that would have solved our problem, Mrs. Henderson said. Maybe whoever put him in that hole was doing us all a favor. Keisha was shocked by the venom in the woman's voice. You can't mean that. Can't I? That man wants to destroy our town. He wants to tear down the Patterson farm and build some monstrosity of a shopping center. He doesn't care about our community or our way of life. That doesn't mean he deserves to die. Mrs. Henderson snorted. You're too soft, Keisha. That's always been your problem. Keisha finished her shopping quickly and left, feeling shaken by the encounter. She had known that people were upset about the development project, but she hadn't realized how deep the anger ran. That evening, as she was helping Marcus with his homework, the phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. Hello? Is this Keisha Williams? Yes. This is Tom Brady from Channel 7 News. I was hoping to talk to you about the rescue in the woods. We'd like to do a story about your heroic actions. I'm not interested, Keisha said quickly. It would only take a few minutes. We could come to your home or meet you somewhere convenient. I said I'm not interested. Please don't call again. She hung up, her hands shaking. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. The last thing she wanted was to be on television, to have her story broadcast to the whole region. She just wanted to go back to her quiet life, to blend into the background again. But it was too late for that. The phone rang twice more that evening, once from a reporter from the regional newspaper, and once from someone who claimed to be from a podcast about true crime stories. Keisha didn't answer either call. The next morning, she found David waiting for her in the hospital parking lot. I saw the article, he said as she approached. I'm sorry. I didn't know they were going to publish your name. It's okay, Keisha said, though it wasn't. I just wish people would leave me alone about it. Are people giving you a hard time? Keisha shrugged. Some people aren't happy that I helped you. David's expression darkened. Because of the development project. Yeah. Keisha, I want you to know that I've been thinking a lot about what happened. About what you said in the woods about community and families. I think maybe I need to reconsider the project. Keisha looked at him in surprise. Really? Really? I've been so focused on the business side of things that I forgot about the human side. The project might make financial sense, but if it's going to hurt people like you and Marcus, then maybe it's not the right thing to do. You'd really consider canceling it? Even after all the money you've already invested. Money isn't everything, David said. I'm starting to remember that. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the morning sun rise over the hospital parking lot. David, Keisha said finally, can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you really here? I mean, you could have called to apologize about the article. You didn't have to drive all the way over here. David looked uncomfortable. I wanted to see you again, he said. I know that sounds strange, but I haven't been able to stop thinking about what happened in the woods. About how you risked your life to save mine, even though you didn't know me. Even though you had every reason to dislike me. I don't dislike you, Keisha said quietly. You should. I'm the bad guy, remember? I'm the one trying to destroy your town. Maybe you're not as bad as people think. David smiled sadly. I hope you're right. I really do. A car pulled into the parking lot, and Keisha recognized Janet's Honda. She would be getting to work soon. I should go, she said. I don't want to be late. Of course. I'm sorry for ambushing you like this. It's okay. I'm glad you came by. David hesitated as if he wanted to say something else. Then he simply nodded and turned to go. David, Keisha called after him. He turned back. Thank you. For reconsidering the project. That means a lot. Thank you for saving my life, he replied. That means everything. As Keisha watched him drive away, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. She had saved David's life, but somehow she was beginning to think that maybe he was saving hers too. 2 weeks later, David showed up at the diner where Keisha worked her weekend shift. She was wiping down tables when she looked up and saw him sitting in a corner booth, looking completely out of place among the truckers and factory workers who made up the diner's usual clientele. He was wearing jeans and a regular button-down shirt instead of his expensive business clothes, but he still stood out like a sore thumb. Keisha walked over to his table, coffee pot in hand. What are you doing here? I wanted to see you, David said simply. And I figured this was the only way to do it without causing a scene at the hospital. You could have called. I did call. You didn't answer. That was true. David had called several times over the past 2 weeks, but Keisha had been avoiding his calls. She wasn't sure why. Maybe because she was afraid of what he might say. Maybe because she was afraid of what she might say back. Coffee? She asked, holding up the pot. Please. She poured him a cup and sat down across from him. The diner was slow that afternoon, so her boss wouldn't mind if she took a short break. How's Marcus? David asked. He's good. He's been asking about you actually. Really? He wants to know if you're going to come climbing trees with us again. David smiled. I'd like that. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their coffee. Keisha found herself studying David's face, noting the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he held his coffee cup with both hands like he was trying to warm himself. "David," she said finally. "What happened with the development project? I heard you called off the town hall meeting that was scheduled for next week." "I did," David said. "I told the town council that we're suspending the project indefinitely while we conduct a new environmental and community impact study. That's wonderful news. People in town are going to be so relieved." "I hope so. I also hope they'll give me a chance to prove that I'm not the monster they think I am." Keisha looked at him curiously. "Why does that matter to you? You could just move on to another project in another town." David was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup. "Because this town matters to me now," he said finally. "Because you matter to me." Keisha felt her heart skip a beat. "David. I know it's crazy," he said quickly. "I know we barely know each other. But I can't stop thinking about you, Keisha. About what you did for me, about the kind of person you are. I've never met anyone like you. You don't know me as well as you think you do. Then let me get to know you better. Let me take you out to dinner. A real dinner, not just fast food with Marcus." Keisha felt torn. Part of her wanted to say yes. David was kind and thoughtful, and she had enjoyed the time they had spent together. But another part of her was scared. Scared of what people would think. Scared of getting involved with someone so different from her. Scared of getting hurt. "I don't think that's a good idea," she said. "Why not?" "Because we're from different worlds, David. You're a millionaire businessman and I'm a single mother who works 2 jobs just to get by. What could we possibly have in common? We could find out." Keisha shook her head. "It wouldn't work. People would talk. They'd say I was only interested in your money, or that you were slumming it with the help. Either way, it would be a disaster. I don't care what people say. Well, I do. I have to live in this town. I have to work with these people, send my son to school with their children. I can't afford to have people talking about me." David reached across the table and took her hand. "Keisha, I understand your concerns. But don't you think you deserve to be happy? Don't you deserve to have someone who cares about you?" "I am happy," she said, though even as she said it, she wasn't sure it was true. "Are you? Really? Or are you just surviving?" The question hit closer to home than Keisha would have liked. She pulled her hand away from his and stood up. "I need to get back to work," she said. "Keisha, wait." But she was already walking away, her heart pounding and her mind racing. She spent the rest of her shift trying not to think about David's words, but they kept echoing in her head. Was she just surviving? Was there more to life than working 2 jobs and raising Marcus alone? When her shift ended, she found David waiting for her in the parking lot. "I'm sorry," he said as she approached her car. "I didn't mean to push you. I needed you to know how I feel." "David, please don't make this harder than it has to be. What if I told you that I'm not the same person I was before you saved my life?" he said. "What if I told you that meeting you has changed everything for me?" Keisha stopped with her hand on her car door. "What do you mean?" "I mean that for the first time in years, I'm thinking about what I want instead of what I should want. I'm thinking about family and community and all the things I gave up when I decided that success was the only thing that mattered. David, I'm thinking about what it would be like to have someone like you in my life. Someone who sees the good in people even when they don't deserve it. Someone who puts their family first and works hard for what they believe in." Keisha felt tears stinging her eyes. "You don't know what you're asking for. My life is complicated. I have a son to think about, bills to pay, responsibilities you can't even imagine. I know that. And I want to be part of it. I want to help carry some of that burden." "Why?" "Because I'm falling in love with you," David said quietly. "I know it's too soon and I know it doesn't make sense, but it's true. I'm falling in love with your strength and your kindness and your beautiful heart." Keisha stared at him, her emotions warring inside her. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to take the risk and see where this could lead. But she was terrified of the consequences. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course. Take all the time you need." As Keisha drove home that night, she couldn't stop thinking about David's words. Was it possible that this successful, wealthy man could really be interested in someone like her? And more importantly, could she afford to find out? Marcus was the one who made the decision for her. It was a Saturday morning, and Keisha was making breakfast when Marcus looked up from his cereal and asked, "Mama, why don't you ever go on dates?" Keisha nearly dropped the pan she was holding. What kind of question is that? Billy's mom goes on dates all the time. She says it's fun to dress up and go to nice restaurants. Billy's mom is different from me. How come? Keisha sat down at the table across from her son. Well, for one thing, Billy's mom doesn't have to work 2 jobs. She has more time for things like dating. But you could make time if you wanted to, right? I suppose. But I'm happy just spending time with you. Marcus considered this. What about that man David? He was nice. And he helped me get down from the tree. What about him? Do you like him? Keisha felt her cheeks getting warm. He's a nice man. But do you like him? Marcus, that's not really something you need to worry about. I think he likes you, Marcus said matter-of-factly. He looked at you the way Daddy used to look at you in the old pictures. Keisha's breath caught. Marcus rarely mentioned his father, who had left when Marcus was only 3 years old. She had thought he didn't remember much about that time. You remember your daddy looking at me a certain way? Kind of. In the pictures he always looked happy when he was looking at you. That's how David looked at you at the restaurant. Out of the mouths of babes, Keisha thought. Her 8-year-old son had noticed something that she had been trying to ignore. Would it bother you if I went on a date with David? She asked. Marcus shrugged. As long as he's nice to you and he doesn't try to replace Daddy. No one could ever replace your daddy, baby. Even though he's not around much, he's still your father and he always will be. I know. But maybe David could be like, a friend daddy? Keisha smiled at her son's logic. Maybe. That afternoon she called David. I've been thinking about what you said, she told him. About dinner. And? If the offer is still open, I'd like to accept. There was a pause and then David's voice came back, filled with joy. Really? You mean it? I mean it. But I have conditions. Name them. First, nothing too fancy. I don't have clothes for fancy restaurants and I don't want to feel out of place. Done. What else? Second, we take things slow. I'm not looking for a whirlwind romance. I have Marcus to think about. Of course. Anything else? Third, if at any point this becomes too complicated or starts affecting Marcus negatively, we stop. No questions asked. Agreed, David said. When can I see you? How about tomorrow night? Sunday. Marcus will be at his friend's house for a sleepover. Perfect. I'll pick you up at 7. After she hung up, Keisha sat staring at the phone, wondering what she had just gotten herself into. She was nervous and excited and terrified all at the same time. The next evening, she stood in front of her closet trying to decide what to wear. She didn't have many options. Her wardrobe consisted mainly of scrubs for work and casual clothes for everything else. Finally, she settled on a simple black dress that she had bought for a wedding 2 years ago and had worn exactly once. David arrived at exactly 7 o'clock, carrying a small bouquet of flowers. He was wearing khakis and a blue shirt and he looked nervous. You look beautiful, he said when she opened the door. Thank you. You look nice too. They drove to a small Italian restaurant on the outskirts of town, the kind of place with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. It was exactly the right choice, nice enough to feel special, but not so fancy that Keisha felt uncomfortable. This is perfect, she said as they were seated. I'm glad you like it. I wasn't sure what you'd prefer. They ordered wine and pasta and settled into easy conversation. David asked about her work at the hospital, and Keisha found herself telling him stories about her patients and co-workers. He told her about his business, but also about his hobbies and interests outside of work. I used to paint, he said. Landscapes mostly. I haven't done it in years, but I used to love it. Why did you stop? I got too busy. Too focused on building the company. I told myself I'd get back to it someday, but someday never came. It's not too late to start again. Maybe you're right. What about you? What do you do for fun? Keisha laughed. Fun? What's that? Between work and Marcus, I don't have a lot of time for hobbies. That's not healthy, you know. Everyone needs time for themselves. Easy for you to say. You can afford to hire people to help with your responsibilities. David looked thoughtful. You're right. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sound preachy. It's okay. I know you didn't mean it that way. They talked about books and movies, discovering that they had more in common than either had expected. David was well-read and thoughtful, with a dry sense of humor that made Keisha laugh. She found herself relaxing, enjoying his company in a way she hadn't enjoyed anyone's company in a long time. Can I ask you something personal? David said as they shared dessert. I guess. Marcus's father. What happened there? Keisha's expression grew sad. We were young when we got together. Too young, probably. When I got pregnant, we tried to make it work, but we were both still kids ourselves. After Marcus was born, James got overwhelmed by the responsibility. He started staying out later, coming home drunk, picking fights. Finally, he just stopped coming home at all. I'm sorry. It's okay. It was probably for the best. Marcus doesn't need to grow up thinking that's what relationships look like. Do you ever hear from him? He sends a birthday card every year and a Christmas present. Sometimes he calls, but not very often. He moved to another state and started a new family. That must be hard on Marcus. It is. He pretends it doesn't bother him, but I know it does. He asks about his dad sometimes, wonders why he doesn't visit. And what do you tell him? I tell him that sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, but that doesn't mean Marcus did anything wrong. I tell him that his daddy loves him, even if he doesn't always know how to show it. David reached across the table and took her hand. You're an amazing mother, Keisha. Marcus is lucky to have you. I just try to do the best I can. That's all any of us can do. When they got back to Keisha's apartment, David walked her to the door. I had a wonderful time tonight, he said. So did I. Can I see you again? Keisha hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. I'd like that. David smiled and leaned down to kiss her cheek. Good night, Keisha. As she watched him drive away, Keisha realized that for the first time in a long time, she was looking forward to tomorrow. Maybe Marcus was right. Maybe she did deserve to be happy. Their second date was at the county fair. David had suggested it after Keisha mentioned that she and Marcus went every year, but that this year she hadn't been able to afford the admission and carnival rides for both of them. Let me take you both, David had said. It'll be fun. Marcus was beside himself with excitement. He had been talking about the fair all week, and the fact that David was coming with them made it even more special. Do you think he'll win me a stuffed animal? Marcus asked as they got ready to leave. I don't know, baby. We'll have to see. David picked them up in his BMW, which Marcus thought was the coolest car he had ever seen. He peppered David with questions about how fast it could go and whether it had GPS and if he could honk the horn. Maybe later, David said with a laugh. When we're not in a residential neighborhood. The fair was crowded and loud and exactly what Keisha remembered from her own childhood. The smell of cotton candy and funnel cakes filled the air, and carnival music played from the rides. Marcus's eyes were wide with wonder as he looked around at all the attractions. Where do you want to start? David asked. The ring toss. Marcus said immediately. I want to win Mama a prize. They made their way to the game booths, where Marcus tried his luck at the ring toss while David and Keisha watched. He didn't win anything, but David stepped up and managed to land 3 rings on the bottles, winning a large stuffed bear. This is for you, he said, handing it to Keisha. You should give it to Marcus, she protested. Nope. Marcus said he wanted to win you a prize. This is from both of us. Marcus beamed with pride as his mother hugged the oversized bear. They spent the next few hours going on rides, eating junk food and playing games. David seemed to genuinely enjoy himself, laughing as he and Marcus went on the tilt-a-whirl and getting competitive at the basketball shooting game. You're really good with him, Keisha said as they watched Marcus go around on the carousel. He's a great kid. Easy to be good with. Not all men would be so patient with someone else's child. David looked at her seriously. Marcus isn't someone else's child. He's your child. That makes him important to me. Keisha felt her heart flutter at his words. This was exactly what she had been afraid of, getting too attached, letting herself believe that this could really work. As the sun started to set, they found themselves sitting on a bench outside the livestock barn, watching Marcus pet the goats in the petting zoo. Can I ask you something? Keisha said. Sure. Why are you really doing this? I mean, you could have any woman you want. Why are you interested in a single mother with a complicated life? David was quiet for a moment, watching Marcus giggle as a goat tried to eat his shoelaces. Do you want the honest answer? He asked. Of course. Because you make me want to be a better person. Because when I'm with you and Marcus, I feel like I'm part of something real. Something that matters. What do you mean? I've spent the last 20 years building my company, making money, acquiring things, but none of it made me happy. Not really. I had a big house and expensive cars and a successful business, but I was lonely. I was empty inside. Keisha nodded, understanding more than she wanted to admit. When you saved my life that day in the woods, David continued, you didn't just save my body, you saved my soul. You reminded me what it feels like to care about someone else, to be part of a family. We're not a family, David. Aren't we? Maybe not in the traditional sense, but we care about each other. We look out for each other. Isn't that what family really is? Before Keisha could answer, Marcus came running over with a huge smile on his face. David, did you see? The baby goat licked my hand. It was so funny. I saw, David said, ruffling Marcus's hair. That was pretty cool. Can we get a goat, Mama? Marcus asked. Please? We live in an apartment, baby. We can't have a goat. What if we move to a house with a yard? Keisha felt her cheeks burning. Marcus, that's not something we can afford right now. What if David helped us? Marcus asked innocently. Marcus? Keisha said, mortified. But David just smiled. You know what, buddy? If your mom ever decides she wants to move to a house with a yard, I'd be happy to help make that happen. Marcus whooped with joy and ran back to the goats, but Keisha felt uncomfortable with the direction the conversation had taken. David, you can't say things like that to him, she said quietly. Why not? Because he'll get his hopes up. Because he'll start expecting things that might not happen. What if they do happen? What if they don't? David sighed. Keisha, I know you're scared. I understand why. But you can't live your whole life being afraid of what might go wrong. Sometimes you have to take a chance on what might go right. As they drove home that night, with Marcus asleep in the back seat clutching a small stuffed pig that David had won for him, Keisha found herself thinking about David's words. Maybe he was right. Maybe she was so focused on protecting herself and Marcus from disappointment that she was missing out on the possibility of real happiness. When they got to her apartment, David helped carry a sleeping Marcus upstairs and tucked him into bed. Thank you, Keisha said as they stood in her living room. For today. For everything. Marcus had the best time. So did I, David said. Thank you for letting me be part of it. He moved closer to her and Keisha felt her heart start to race. This time when he leaned down to kiss her, it wasn't on the cheek. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, and Keisha found herself kissing him back. When they finally broke apart, David rested his forehead against hers. I'm falling for you, Keisha, he whispered. I know it's complicated and I know it's scary, but I can't help it. I'm falling for you too, she whispered back. And that terrifies me. We'll figure it out, David said. Together. As Keisha watched him leave that night, she realized that somewhere along the way she had stopped thinking about David as a stranger she had saved in the woods. She had started thinking about him as someone she couldn't imagine living without. The question was, what was she going to do about it? The call came at 3 a.m. Keisha jolted awake at the sound of her phone ringing, immediately afraid that something had happened to Marcus. But when she looked at the caller ID, she saw David's name. David? What's wrong? Keisha. His voice was strained, frightened. I'm sorry to call so late, but I didn't know who else to turn to. Keisha sat up in bed, instantly alert. What happened? Someone broke into my house tonight. The police are here, but they found something. Something that connects to what happened in the woods. What do you mean? Can you come over? I know it's late and I know it's a lot to ask, but I really need you here. Keisha looked at the clock. Marcus was sound asleep and she hated to wake him, but David sounded truly shaken. Give me 20 minutes, she said. She quickly got dressed and woke Marcus, explaining that they needed to go help David. Marcus, still half asleep, didn't ask many questions as she bundled him into the car. David's house was in the expensive part of town, a large colonial with perfectly manicured landscaping. Police cars filled the driveway, their red and blue lights flashing in the darkness. Keisha had never seen David's house before, and under different circumstances she might have been intimidated by its size and obvious cost. Tonight she was just worried about David. She found him sitting on his front steps talking to Detective Williams. He looked pale and shaken, and when he saw her, he stood up immediately. Thank you for coming, he said, pulling her into a hug. I'm sorry to drag you into this. What happened? She asked. Detective Williams answered. Someone broke in through the back door. Ransacked Mr. Chen's home office, but didn't take anything valuable. No electronics, no jewelry, no cash. Then what were they looking for? That's what we're trying to figure out, the detective said. But they left something behind. Something that suggests this is connected to the incident in the woods. She led them around to the back of the house, where David's home office window had been shattered. On the wall, spray-painted in red letters, were the words, "You should have stayed buried." Keisha felt a chill run down her spine. Marcus, who had been quietly holding her hand, pressed closer to her side. This is a direct threat, Detective Williams said. Mr. Chin, I think you need to consider getting some protection. Maybe hiring a security company. I don't want to live like a prisoner in my own home, David said. Better than not living at all, the detective replied grimly. They spent another hour talking to the police and examining the damage. Whoever had broken in had been thorough, going through every drawer and cabinet in David's office. But as Detective Williams had noted, nothing seemed to be missing. "It's like they were looking for something specific," David said as they surveyed the mess. "Any idea what that might be?" Keisha asked. "No. I can't think of anything that would be worth breaking into my house for." Marcus had fallen asleep on David's couch while they talked to the police. When the officers finally left, it was nearly 5 in the morning. "I should get him home," Keisha said, looking at her sleeping son. "Or you could stay here," David said quietly. "Both of you. I have plenty of room, and to be honest, I don't really want to be alone right now." Keisha hesitated. She could see the fear in David's eyes, the vulnerability that he was trying to hide. And the truth was, she didn't want to leave him alone either. Not after what had happened. "Okay," she said. "But just for tonight." David showed her to a guest room down the hall from the master bedroom. It was bigger than her entire living room, with its own bathroom and a king-sized bed. She tucked Marcus in and then went back downstairs to find David cleaning up the mess in his office. "You don't have to do that now," she said. "I can't sleep anyway," David replied. "Might as well make myself useful." Keisha picked up some scattered papers and helped him straighten the room. They worked in comfortable silence, and slowly the office began to look normal again. "David," Keisha said as they finished, "are you sure there's nothing you can think of that someone might be looking for? Any business deals that went bad? Any enemies you might have made?" David sat down heavily in his desk chair. "That's just it, Keisha. I've been racking my brain all night and I can't think of anything. Sure, the development project has made some people angry, but angry enough to bury me alive and then break into my house? It doesn't make sense. What about your business partners? Your employees? Anyone who might have access to sensitive information? I don't know. Maybe. The police are going to investigate all of that." Keisha looked around the office, trying to imagine what someone might have been searching for. Her eyes fell on a family photo on David's desk, a younger David with an older couple who were obviously his parents. "Tell me about your family," she said. "Not much to tell. My parents are both gone now. No siblings. I was married once, but that ended years ago. What about your ex-wife? Could she be involved in this somehow?" David shook his head. "Linda lives in California with her new husband. We haven't spoken in years, and when we divorced it was amicable. She got a substantial settlement and moved on with her life." "Any other relatives? Cousins, aunts, uncles?" "Some distant cousins in China, but we don't keep in touch." Keisha frowned. Something was nagging at her, but she couldn't put her finger on what it was. "David, when you were buried in that box, did the person who put you there say anything to you? Did you see who it was?" "No, I told you. I was hiking and I fell through what I thought was a weak spot in the trail. When I woke up, I was already in the box underground. But you said you hit your head when you fell. How long were you unconscious?" David thought about it. "I'm not sure. It was still light when I fell, but dark when I woke up. So several hours at least. So someone could have been watching you. Waiting for the right moment. I suppose. But why me? Why not some random hiker?" That was the question that had been bothering Keisha all along. Why David specifically? What made him a target? As they went upstairs to try to get some sleep, Keisha couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. Something that connected David's near-death experience in the woods to the break-in at his house. Something that suggested this was far from over. The answer came 3 days later in the form of a phone call that changed everything. Keisha was at work when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer since she was in the middle of checking on patients, but something made her look at the caller ID. It was David. "I can't talk long," she said when she answered. "I'm at work." "Keisha, you need to come to the police station right now," David said, his voice tight with emotion. What? What happened?" "They caught him. The person who buried me alive and broke into my house. And Keisha." David's voice broke. "You're not going to believe who it is." Keisha's heart started pounding. "Who?" "Just come to the station. Please. I need you here." Keisha got permission to leave work early and drove to the police station with her mind racing. Who could it be? Someone from town who was angry about the development project? A disgruntled employee? A business rival? She found David sitting in Detective Williams' office, looking like he had seen a ghost. His face was pale and his hands were shaking. "Keisha," Detective Williams said when she walked in. "I'm glad you're here. We need to talk to you about something." "What's going on?" Keisha asked, taking a seat next to David. "We arrested someone this morning," the detective said. "James Patterson. He's been charged with attempted murder and breaking and entering." Keisha's blood ran cold. James Patterson? As in the Patterson farm? The land that David's company wants to develop. That's right. But there's more to it than that. Detective Williams opened a file on her desk. James Patterson is also the son of Margaret Patterson, who owned the farm. She died 6 months ago and left the property to James. That's when Mr. Chen's company approached him about selling. I don't understand, Keisha said. If James inherited the farm, why didn't he just refuse to sell? Why try to kill David? Because, David said quietly, James had already signed a contract to sell. He needed the money to pay off gambling debts. But after he signed, he started having second thoughts. He wanted out of the deal, but the contract was ironclad. So he decided to eliminate the problem permanently, Detective Williams continued. If Mr. Chen died, the contract would be void and James could keep the farm. Keisha shook her head in disbelief. That's insane. He was willing to commit murder over a piece of land. It gets worse, David said. James confessed to everything. But Keisha, there's something else. Something about you. What about me? Detective Williams consulted her notes. James Patterson says he knows you. Says you two went to high school together. Keisha tried to remember a James Patterson from high school, but the name didn't ring a bell. I don't remember him. He remembers you, the detective said. In fact, he's been watching you for months. Ever since the news stories about the development project started running. A chill ran down Keisha's spine. Watching me? Why? Because he had a crush on you in high school, David said, his voice filled with disgust. He's been following you, learning your routine. He knew you liked to take Marcus on picnics in those woods. The pieces suddenly clicked into place in Keisha's mind. He was counting on me finding you. That's right, Detective Williams said. He wanted you to be the one to discover Mr. Chen's body. He thought it would be poetic justice. The woman he was obsessed with, finding the dead body of the man who was destroying his family's legacy. But I didn't find a body, Keisha said. I found David alive and I saved him. Which completely ruined James's plan, the detective said. That's why he broke into Mr. Chen's house. He was looking for a copy of the contract, thinking that if he could destroy it, he could still get out of the deal. Keisha felt sick to her stomach. You mean I was never just randomly walking through those woods? He planned for me to be there. I'm afraid so, Detective Williams said gently. James Patterson has been stalking you for months. He knows where you work, where you live, where Marcus goes to school. David reached over and took Keisha's hand. The police are getting a restraining order, he said. And James will be in jail for a long time. You and Marcus are safe. But Keisha didn't feel safe. She felt violated, manipulated, used. The idea that someone had been watching her and Marcus, planning to use her in his twisted scheme, made her skin crawl. There's one more thing, Detective Williams said. James wants to see you. He's asking to speak with you before he's transferred to the county jail. Absolutely not, David said immediately. There's no way she's going anywhere near that psychopath. It's up to Keisha, the detective said. But I should warn you, he seems to think that what he did was romantic somehow. That he was trying to protect you from the big bad developer. Keisha felt anger rising in her chest. This man had tried to kill David. He had terrorized them both. He had been stalking her and her son. And he thought it was romantic? I want to see him, she said. Keisha, no, David said. You don't owe him anything. I know I don't. But I want to look him in the eye and tell him exactly what I think of his idea of romance. Detective Williams led them down a hallway to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. Through a window, Keisha could see James Patterson sitting in handcuffs waiting for her. He was smaller than she had expected, with thinning hair and nervous eyes. She vaguely remembered him now, a quiet kid who had sat behind her in English class. She had probably spoken to him a handful of times in 4 years of high school. When she walked into the room, James's face lit up with a smile that made her stomach turn. Keisha, he said. You look exactly the same as you did in high school. Still beautiful. Don't, Keisha said, sitting down across from him. Don't you dare talk to me like we're old friends. But we are friends, James said. We always were. You just never noticed me. I never noticed you because you were nobody to me, Keisha said coldly. And you're still nobody to me. James's smile faltered. I did this for you, Keisha. I was trying to protect you. Protect me from what? From him, James said, nodding toward the window where David stood watching. From men like him who use their money and power to take advantage of women like you. Women like me? Keisha's voice was dangerously quiet. You know what I mean. Working class women. Single mothers? Women who are vulnerable. Keisha leaned forward. Let me tell you something, James Patterson. I'm not vulnerable. I'm not a victim. And I don't need some pathetic stalker to protect me from anything. But he's just using you, James insisted. Can't you see that? Once he gets bored, he'll throw you away and move on to the next pretty face. That's not your decision to make, Keisha said. My life is my own. My choices are my own. You had no right to interfere. I love you, James said desperately. I've loved you since high school. You don't love me, Keisha said. You don't even know me. What you feel is obsession and it's sick. She stood up to leave, but James called after her. He'll hurt you, Keisha. Men like him always do. Keisha turned back to face him one last time. The only person who has hurt me is you, she said. You terrorized my family. You tried to kill the man I love. You made me feel unsafe in my own town. The man I love? James's face crumpled. You love him? Yes, Keisha said without hesitation. I love him. And he loves me. And Marcus loves him too. We're a family, James. Something you'll never understand because you're too selfish and twisted to see past your own sick fantasies. James started crying then, ugly tears that made Keisha feel nothing but disgust. I just wanted you to be happy, he sobbed. Then you should have left me alone, Keisha said. Happiness was never yours to give. She walked out of the room and into David's arms. He held her tight while she shook with anger and relief. It's over, he whispered into her hair. It's finally over. Detective Williams appeared beside them. James Patterson will be charged with attempted murder, stalking, breaking and entering, and terroristic threats. With his confession and the evidence we have, he'll be going away for a very long time. Good, Keisha said firmly. He deserves whatever he gets. As they walked out of the police station together, David stopped and turned to face her. Keisha, what you said in there about loving me? I meant it, she said. I love you, David. I've been afraid to say it, afraid to admit it even to myself, but it's true. David cupped her face in his hands. I love you too. More than I ever thought possible. He kissed her then, right there on the steps of the police station, and Keisha felt like she could finally breathe again. The nightmare was over. James Patterson was going to prison. And she was free to love David without fear. So what happens now? She asked when they broke apart. David smiled. Now we go home and tell Marcus that we're going to be a real family. If you'll have me. Are you asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'll marry me, Keisha Williams. I'm asking if you'll let me be Marcus's stepfather and your husband and the luckiest man alive. Keisha felt tears streaming down her face, but for the first time in weeks they were tears of joy. Yes, she said. Yes to all of it. As they drove home together, Keisha thought about how strange life was. 3 months ago, she had been a single mother working 2 jobs and struggling to make ends meet. She had never heard of David Chin, never imagined that their lives would become so intertwined. But sometimes fate worked in mysterious ways. Sometimes the worst moments led to the best outcomes. Sometimes saving someone else's life meant saving your own. When they pulled into the parking lot of her apartment complex, Marcus came running out to meet them. Keisha's neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been watching him while she dealt with the police. Mama? Marcus called out. Did they catch the bad man? Yes, baby, Keisha said, scooping him up in her arms. They caught him. We're safe now. Good, Marcus said. Now can David move in with us? Our apartment is pretty small, but I think he'd fit. David laughed. Actually, buddy, I was thinking maybe you and your mom might want to move in with me. I have a big house with a yard where we could get that goat you wanted. Marcus's eyes went wide. Really? A real goat? Well, maybe we'll start with a dog, Keisha said. But yes, really. Marcus whooped with joy and threw his arms around David's neck. I love you, David, he said simply. I love you too, Marcus, David replied, his voice thick with emotion. Both of you. Forever and always. As they stood there in the parking lot, the 3 of them holding each other tight, Keisha realized that James Patterson had been wrong about one thing. David wasn't going to hurt her or abandon her. He was going to love her and Marcus for the rest of their lives. And she was going to love him back, with all the strength and courage that had saved his life in those dark woods. Because sometimes when you save someone else, you end up saving yourself too. 6 months later, they were married in a small ceremony in the backyard of David's house, their house now. Marcus walked Keisha down the aisle, beaming with pride in his little tuxedo. David cried when he saw her in her simple white dress, and Keisha cried when he promised to love her and Marcus as long as he lived. The Patterson farm was never developed. David had torn up the contract and donated the land to the county to be preserved as a nature park. James Patterson was serving 15 years in state prison and would never bother them again. Marcus got his dog, a golden retriever named Charlie, who followed him everywhere and slept at the foot of his bed. David had indeed started painting again, and the walls of their home were filled with landscapes of the woods where they had first met. And sometimes, late at night when Marcus was asleep and they were sitting together on their back porch, Keisha would think about that day in the woods. About the voice calling for help from beneath the earth. About the choice she had made to stay and dig, to risk her own safety for a stranger. It was the best decision she had ever made. Because in saving David's life, she had found her own happy ending. And in learning to trust love again, she had discovered that sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the darkest places. The voice beneath the earth had called out for help, and she had answered. But in the end they had saved each other.